How you guys doing? So I'm gonna do a little talk on. So I run a company called Fueled. We actually, I don't even know. Okay, there you go. It is on. Um, you guys can hear me, right? If I just take it aside, awesome. Um, so I run. For those of you who don't know me, I run a company called Fueled. We build a lot of mobile apps in the industry, and some of which you've heard. Most recently, we launched Barney's for the retailer. I don't know if you guys know QuizUp. We built that platform on Android and launched it about a month and a half ago. And for the last 4 years, I've basically been working with entrepreneurs and kind of refining their ideas on like, hey, I have this concept, and I want to bring it to life. And we've kind of built a team around taking ideas and bringing those ideas to life. And we've learned a lot as a company. In working with hundreds of entrepreneurs on what their ideas were and how actually what's a process that works and what process typically leads towards failure. And we've seen that there was a lot of things even early on that we felt was the kind of correct route to go on, that seemed intuitive. Like this is like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. But then we found out that in reality it was just completely wrong. So one of the things I've done is I've like a small list of about 10 things that I wanted to share that basically we've learned as a company that entrepreneurs typically make in terms of decisions, that just are so intuitive but are just wrong, just flat out wrong. And so before that, before I start, just want to do a quick poll. Just want to see out there, how many of you, just raise your hand, are currently running a company right now? Awesome. How many of you out there are planning on running a company? So you're just new entrepreneur, kind of want to get it out there, or your company's just like a couple months out the door, something like that? Okay, cool. And how many of you are neither? Just you're not running it, you're just here, just want to check it out, you're thinking about it? Awesome. Cool. So one of the first things I want to do, and especially at a conference like this, it's really interesting because you go from one panel to another panel and it's a lot of people giving advice. And one of the things that I give advice on is actually be really careful about taking advice. So it's interesting to be in a position where I'm about to give you a bunch of information and say, hey, listen to me, I have this data, it proves it, but I'm also going to tell you, hey, take everything with a grain of salt. There's certain things that I believe people should take advice on, maybe when it comes to topics or areas of your business that are not associated to the vision of your company. So I think vision is something very special. I think people have a certain vision for what a company should be, and they should stick to that vision. And I've seen a lot of ideas be crushed by people that just crush the vision. If you need help in something like funding or financing or startup debt or something in an area that's structured, it's okay, perfect. Go to someone that knows what they're talking about. But if you're going to take advice on an idea, I mean, I can almost name every startup that's been successful that could have got messed up because some expert in the industry would have been like, oh, I don't know about that. I don't know, guys, if you remember I think it was like a TechCrunch article when Twitter came out. They're like, oh, Twitter doesn't get it. It's all public. It's like, no, you don't get it. It's a completely different vision. So one of the things I want to tell you is if you have a vision for a product, that vision is what's special. Stick to it, and don't necessarily take all the advice that's associated to that. I was in my space the other day. I also have a co-working space that's around 20,000 square feet, and so we have about 35 startups in that space, and we're monitoring what they're doing and just paying attention to everything. And it was really funny. I saw a guy that was starting a new company come into the space, and he joined someone else that was running a company for the last 2 years and had basically run it into the ground. And it was just like one of those epic failures, and it was a concept, and it was something that was flawed from the beginning. And it was really interesting to see him in that scenario giving advice to someone that was starting his company. And I was like, whoa, like something's broken there. And I've seen that several times before. It's like you have to be really careful. If you're gonna solicit advice from someone, make sure that advice is just, make sure that person is actually successful, has the knowledge and is actually knowledgeable on whatever that main topic is that you're inquiring about. So I think the first and foremost thing that we've seen from startups that have launched their businesses, and I think one of the mistakes that we made early on too, it's that standard route of, and the standard concept of an MVP. And just raise your hands, how many people know what an MVP is? Okay, about half, a little bit more. So it's really interesting. If you really think about what the concept of an MVP is, we try and build something in a month's period, but there's an extreme level. If you all can think right now of a startup idea, and for those of you who raised your hand, think of what an MVP is. And for those of you who didn't, MVP is minimum viable product, so the smallest product that you need to be able to launch whatever your goal is. So if you can right now for me think about what the MVP of your product is, just like, close your eyes, okay, cool, it has X number of features, it can do X, Y, and Z. Eric Ries is really popular for popularizing this. Take that idea, and if you really think that's the minimal form, what about a site that just has a download link without any product behind it, just to test to see if that idea is valid? What about two sites that you're A/B testing? Okay, you have one idea for a product, you have another idea that's slightly tangential. What if you spend $500 and just market both of them, right? What % of people click that download button? That's invaluable information. There was a story that Eric talked about where he was on a team and he spent years building software. And it was a team of 5 engineers. They spent 2 years behind closed doors, built this amazing piece of software. And when they went to launch it, they put up all the visuals and they had this download link. Same concept, just a download button. And they marketed the product and no one clicked the download link. They didn't need a product. All they needed to do is just put up a landing page. And I think a lot of times, and I think that concept kind of like hones in of like whatever your minimal viable products you think is, like, hey, it has to have these features to launch, chances are you can cut that in half. Chances are you could cut that in half, and I tell people when they come to me, if you can't get something out there where you're grabbing information within 1 week of your idea, you're already starting to fail. So people come up and they have these, grand ideas on like, oh, I want to disrupt fashion, and I'm going to take high-end couture and mix it with some street style, and okay, cool. So launch a blog, put those 2 up there, put buy links, have affiliates. It's something you can do in a week, and something you can test out, right? So that concept of an MVP, I know it's talked about a lot. It's so true. I think if you, again, anything that you want to build, you can get data around that concept. Think about a hackathon. People build stuff over a weekend, so 2 days. I mean, my bar is pretty low. I tell people 1 week. I don't want to make it too intense. Hey, in 2 days, I want to see an MVP. But I think 1 week, and every week from there, you can grab more and more and more information. I think it's one of the most important things that you can do when you're starting a company, and I see it as like one of the biggest failures. Another thing that people obsess over that we've seen, and I think it's only a certain personality type obsesses over it, it's code quality. And it's really interesting to come from me because I run a development shop, and of course, we advocate for good code, and you would hire us because you would want good code. But I can tell you honestly, you don't need to have solid code in your first version. You just need to test out your concept. Whatever your concept is, it will change in the future. It can guarantee you. And that first version, your goal is to get something out for as cheap as possible for you to learn about that idea. That's it. If you think about all the successes out there, I mentioned Twitter. I mean, we remember Twitter failing just constantly. The backend was built on Ruby, and you can only imagine how many times they rebuilt that backend. You look at other startups that have succeeded and exited, name any one of them, Instagram. They built Bourbon first. How many of you guys have heard about Bourbon? Awesome. So Bourbon was Kevin Systrom's first startup app that he built before Instagram. And again, it was another app, and it did a bunch of just random things. You could like post text, audio, there's like images, there's video, there's just like everything baked into one app because he was like, okay, cool, this is what, people want. He noticed that people were engaging the most and posting the most photos. He's like, okay, cool. I'm gonna scrap everything that I built and I'm gonna now build Instagram. And I think one of the key things there is the focus on lack of features. I think he went to an extreme with Bourbon and added as many features as he could. And with Instagram, it's shocking how small the feature set is. It's almost like it's still an MVP. It's kind of crazy. I mean, you can't even look past the last 200 people that followed you. Like that's just not an option. They just don't care. Like if you want to, you click on followers, you can only see the last 200. If anyone else had that product, the first thing that they would add is a regram button. It's like, of course, it makes sense. Like version 2, you see a photo you like, you regram it. There is no regram, right? The links don't work. Everyone complains. It's like, oh, why? I go through the feed, I can't click on a link. Why is that? And it's like, he knows that he's just delivering one feed of content of photos because he tested it. He saw the data prove that people will engage more if they don't get distracted, and that's what he delivered. And that's so key. So, I mean, you have kind of all of these concepts where you have people that have built products, built MVPs, come out and rebuilt everything that they've done. So if you have a concept, the goal, again, get something out quick. Do not obsess over, oh, I need the best quality, and it has to be perfect, everything has to be clean. Don't do it, just get it out there. You're gonna rip apart your entire version, you're gonna throw it away, you're gonna rebuild it, build it for the least amount possible. Next thing's really funny. So we've had clients, you'd be shocked, we've had clients that have come in and have an idea, and then they come up with a name for the idea, and then they obsess over the name. It's one of those things where I've seen 2 clients give up equity because they wanted a specific URL. I can tell you for a fact you'll drive the same amount of traffic if you have the word app after your URL or not. People, when they find a product that they're really passionate about, they're not concerned with what the URL is. And I just want to make sure that everyone out there is just, if you're thinking about playing that URL game, and everyone's sitting on every URL that's out there, don't worry about it. Just add the word the Facebook. Once you're successful, you can buy out anyone, right? You can take out the you can drop the app. Foursquare was Play Foursquare. I mean, it's like it's horrible. And then they raised, everyone started using the app, and then they dropped Play, and then they bought Foursquare. So again, just add an extra word to your name. It's like it's not a big deal. Another one that's really interesting and one that kind of hits home with me is technical co-founders. This is like a big topic in New York. I think that there's a lot of people with ideas, a lot of people that are very innovative here, and there's a lack of technical talent. Again, it's funny that I'm talking about it because a lot of people come to my shop if they're lacking that, and the advice I'm going to give you is slightly counterintuitive to that, but don't wait. There are so many ways now for people to build products, whether it's using a freelance developer on Elance or really anything that's out there. I've seen people that have come in and told me about their ideas and asked for advice, and then 4 months later, they're like, oh, well, I'm still looking for my technical co-founder, because that's the startup route. I find my technical co-founder, I inspire them, and we build together. 4 months? Are you kidding? There's so much you could have done in those 4 months. If anything, you could have built something that would have attracted that technical co-founder, right? I think it's key once you have an idea just to start building. Again, it comes back to that MVP concept. And you don't, and I just want to get rid of that notion that a lot of people have in their heads on, listen, you have to have that technical person at your side for the company to be successful. You will get that technical person if your idea is sound. They will come. So one of the main concepts that we see in the differences between people that are able to build successful ideas and ones that kind of are say, temporarily in fashion are, I call it building a platform on top of a platform. So if you look at a lot of the successful apps that have been released or social networks, companies out there, they've built their own platform. You know, Snapchat didn't ride off Facebook. Instagram built its own network. A lot of the products that have really succeeded have succeeded because they built their own platform, right? And then other people were building on top of that platform. And so a lot of the startup ideas that we hear are always, hey, we're just trying to leverage an existing platform that's already out there. Shy away from that in general. Even something as small as like, hey, there's an overarching industry that's retail. And retail right now is you know, it's changing, and you know, I'm gonna build an app that kind of helps bring retail into the next dimension. No, redefine what retail means. Don't build an app for a store. Build a whole new way of doing commerce, right? And that's the difference between building off a platform. There's a platform out there that's standard retail, and that's decreasing in the industry, right? People are moving online. Think about how to redefine that retail experience, but do not build a platform that sits on top of a retail experience. So that's like one example of you know, a platform on top of a platform, and why you would want to like shy away from it. Another notion that I always hear, it's always in the first meeting, and it's really interesting. They come in and like, okay, cool, I'm gonna build this app, and X, Y, and Z brand are just gonna buy it. You know, I've talked to them, they're into it. You know, they have the budget. They spend, you know, $20 million a year on marketing, or $50 million a year on marketing, and they can't wait for me to release this product. If you're building for brands, you're already in trouble. Brands follow platforms that are already successful because the users are there and the traffic's there. So without that, you're out of luck. Brands get pitched so much, and they're just being nice. They're brands. They have to retain their image. They're not going to say, hey, you know what? You build it. We're not going to support you. They will at least give you the information that they're going to support you, and then once it's built, they say, okay, well, you know, how many users? You know, we pay based on you know, CPMs. Don't build for brands. If that's your primary use case, rethink what your product is, because it's probably not going to be successful. And that's key. I think there's been time and time again where we've seen people come in, pitch, try and build, fail, and then pivot to something else. And that actually brings up another topic. One of the best ways that people figure out what actually does make sense is by failing. So, you know, I just talked about Kevin Systrom and bourbon. He would have never come up with Instagram had he not failed with bourbon. I wouldn't have come up with my concept for Fueled had I not failed previously to that with a company called Flash Vacancy. You learn a ton when you fail, right? And so the goal initially, if you're starting out, is to fail, and hopefully fail fast, right? If your concept isn't working, don't obsess over it. It's good to fail. Learn exactly why it's not working, pivot that, and then there's a chance it might turn into something. There's just been so many cases where we've seen people come up with an initial idea, see it fail, but learn a ton, and that entire learning process is your competitive advantage to anyone else in that space, because you actually learned hands-on what failed in that industry, and now you have a new idea. Now, that new idea might fail also, but now you have even more of a competitive advantage in that industry, because you now know all the things that will not work, and you can narrow down that one thing that probably will work. So that's another key. Fail. If you're going to fail early, fail fast. This is a really common one. Vesting schedules. I think everyone should know this by now, but we still see it at the company. You'll have founders that'll come in, friends that kind of come in together and say, hey, you know, we just thought of this idea. We want to build this together, or we've already started building this. Can you help us? And we look at the cap table, and they just don't have anything formally documented at all. I think it's super important everyone understand the concept of vesting schedules when they're starting a company with friends. even, like right now it's like, oh, okay, cool, we did document something and, we're both, 50%. Well, what if your friend gets an offer at a job and he just kind of goes off and he owns 50% of your company now, right? The concept of vesting schedule is over time, everyone earns their equity once they put in their blood, sweat, and tears, right? So it's just an unbelievably super important concept that I think some people just, amongst friends, just completely forget about. Another thing that's interesting, a lot of people in the tech space focus on a tech audience. Build for the generic consumer that's out there. Don't build for the crazy techie. The techie will have pretty much, like, I view him as this guy with ADD. He downloads one app, then he downloads another app and uses this app, and the only time he will actually focus on one app is when the broader community actually follows it. It's like, oh, okay, I should pay a little bit more attention to that. I wasn't going to. So when you're thinking about the audience, think about your non-tech friend. Think about your average Instagram user. Think about those users as opposed to thinking about all the people in the startup space, because those are not your average person that's in the wild. So there's this idea of a revenue model, right? Everyone kind of, it's like, hey, do you have a model? Are you making money? What's your revenue model? How much money are you making first quarter, next quarter? I was talking to someone at the company and I was like, just fire off a couple things that you think, amateur entrepreneurs make. And one of the things he said was, well, a lot of times they come in and they have no revenue model. And I was like, Drew, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I mean, sometimes that makes sense, but you see what's happening out there? People are selling their companies for these crazy prices. And so I come from a finance background where I'm so used to fundamental analysis and a fundamental valuation tactic where you grow your revenue and you have profit and you have a multiple of the profit and that's what you're worth, right? And we're used to hearing that, in business school, it's like, okay, you have to make money. This is how you do valuations. These are how the stocks are valued. Everything is like based around making money. But I mean, if your goal is to exit, really all you need is users. And so I'm gonna say, hey, yeah, it is important to have a revenue model, and that is the traditional way. And of course, there's a ton of businesses out there where it only works if, right? So have that. But if you have an idea that's truly viral, and it has no way whatsoever of making money, you can probably make a decent amount more than the guy that does have a business model. And there's one story I want to share with you. There's a founder that I really respect in the space. He's been working 5 years on this one company, built it up. His revenue is right now north of $15 million. He's raised 2 rounds of financing. It's a media company, and he's kind of viewed as a successful character in the space. And I was talking to him, and he was just cursing. He's like, Rameet, he's like, I hate the fact that I make money. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is great. You have real revenue, all this stuff. He's like, no, man. He's like, valuation. He's like, I've spent blood, sweat, and tears in this company. I've raised 2 rounds. I only now, with all the dilution, and the co-founders have like 10% left. The company's worth $50 million. So he's like, so I spent 5 years of my time, and I've gotten maybe if I exit for $50 million, I maybe got $5 million. Now, for some of you, it's like, oh, that's not bad. For him, he's a really successful guy, and he feels like he's entitled to more. And he's like, the only reason he's like, I'm tacked to a $50 million valuation compared to all these other crazy random media companies is because I have real revenue. He's like, man, if I could do this again, my next company, no real revenue. It's just really funny to hear someone that has built a real business in the traditional mind. And I'm not even saying all of you should, just go scrap your business model and just get wild. No. I'm just saying it's interesting that right now we're in a bubble that for the next year, I don't know, 2 years, who knows? We're not really sure how long it's gonna last, but it might be worth the risk on not building a real business. I'm just saying these valuations are insane. What people are able to build over the course of a year or year and a half that just garners a ton of users without making any money and being worth over $100 million in a year is insane. So if you do have an idea that's viral that has no business model, go for it. It's probably worth the risk over the next 2 years because everything is so frothy right now. And I just wanted to share that story with you about my friend because it's funny to see someone break down that has a real business and just like is dreaming about his next company. And he's coming to me with his ideas. He's like, don't worry about the business model. Like, I just want users. $35 a user. That's the average. That's what I'm going for. Anyways, so I think that was my last tidbit. So I want to open up. We have about 15 minutes left, and I like to do 15 minutes of Q&A with the group. After this panel, by the way, I'm going to be bringing up 4 founders, and they're going to be talking about how they almost failed and things that they almost failed on that they learned. But before that, I just want to open it up to the floor, and while we have 15 minutes left, and just say, hey, listen, what questions do you have for me?
Talk a little bit more about the MVP idea of having 2 sites and the download.
Yeah, I mean, so, yeah.
Like download, what happened?
That's a great question. So the 2 sites, it's a standard A/B test. That would be funny. So there's ways to just be comical about it and just send them to YouTube. There's ways to be a little bit more strategic about it. So again, one of the main things, and I think one of the reasons why people don't do this is they're like, Rameet, my brand's important. When I launch, it has to be perfect. I can't launch a product and people go to the site and like the product's not there. Are you kidding? That'll hurt my brand. And you're like, that's not true. It's gonna hurt your brand with what, 200 people, 500 people? If your product is successful, millions of people are gonna see that, right? That 500 that you learned information from is so much more valuable on them just not coming back, but you learning from them than you trying to retain them early on. Those early users are so valuable. Yes, you're gonna lose your early users. Yes, they're gonna be using code according to my methodology that might suck your first version, but you're gonna learn so much from them. Think like none of you guys use Bourbon. Think about the people that use Bourbon and like what, a couple thousand people, but that gave Kevin enough knowledge to build out a product with 100 million users. Like it's so worth it. So that's one thing. In terms of what to put there, once people click and there's like nothing there, instead of saying oops or something, you can say, hey, listen, our planned launch date is this. Give us your email address. We will send you an email. And they kind of, it's like error handling. It's like you catch it, okay, cool. Oh, they haven't launched yet. Okay, whatever, I'll come back. And they forget. They're not that obsessed with your product, so it's not like you're really breaking their hearts. Next question.
I'm just curious, do you have any books or a particular book that's spoken to you that you recommend?
Yeah, so I mentioned one in the talk. It's Eric Ries's Lean Startup. There's another one that I read recently. It's a little old. It's called Rework. Has anyone heard of Rework? Yeah, awesome. Rework's killer. You can just crush that book in like an hour and a half. But it's so valuable. They take everything to the extreme. Like a few of my concepts are a little bit more extreme. All of their concepts are extreme, but it's a great way to reset your brain to go into an extreme space and then push yourself a little bit more into reality, but you're a little bit more further out than you would normally be. So Rework is great, and you can read it like on a flight somewhere. Yeah. Yeah.
What is your advice to when your client is somebody like Barney's?
Yeah.
What is your advice on launching a product where they truly do have their brand?
Yeah. And so that's a great question. So there is an exception to your traditional major MVP, and it's if you personally or your company has a larger following. So it's harder for companies like Barney's or like Google or like other companies to release what we consider a real MVP because they have this massive following. The concept or the people that I'm talking to mainly are your average founder. Like you don't have an audience that's that big that's gonna hurt you in the future. And because like as an individual, most people are not that influential at that stage in their career, they can test the waters. right? But for a client like Barney's, your MVP, it's a different definition of an MVP. You can still use the concept in terms of, even a client like that, it's gonna have like 101 things they want, and you say, okay, cool, we'll build out the core shopping experience first, we'll build out the content component next, we'll build this out next, but it's slightly larger cycles, and it's tested and validated. So it's almost like instead of working on a 1 week cycle, you're working on a 2 month cycle, You can still incorporate the concept of an MVP, it's just on a slightly bigger scale. We actually, it's funny, we won Barney's because we pitched a Tinder interface for shopping. But we knew that was a really dumb idea, but we knew that they would think that that was innovative. And then when we got the client, we obviously ditched that idea and explained to them why it was retarded. Yeah, next question. We have like 5 more minutes. No? Yeah, go for it. Okay.
What do you think the future of services is? Like, what do you see you guys, are you going to be targeting more bigger brands like that? Or
Oh, in terms of my company?
kind of understanding where you guys are trying to go? Are you more interested in disrupting the Accentures of the world and big consulting? Or
Yeah, I'm gonna just very briefly answer that because I don't want the conversation to be about my company. But briefly, we are approximately 70% startup and 30% enterprise clients, and our model is to work with potentially one of the next big startups and help them build their company so that we own a small portion of that. So we see our upside in actually owning one of the next big ones. But I'll answer your question in a different way that's more informative, that's not about my company. One of the things that I truly believe, and one of the things that a lot of people have, like how they've made mistakes in the past, and a lot of people ask me the question because I focus on mobile. Rameet, like what's going on with responsive web? Like is that a platform I should be building for? I hear that a lot of people built for it and then pulled away, and should I build my app natively, or and try and find an iOS developer and it's really expensive, or should I just get some JavaScript developer and build something out on some other platform and port it over to iOS because it's cheaper? Like what's going on? In that question, I think it's really interesting. I think that the phones that are out there now, mainly this phone and and Android, it's not really empowering web apps, and it's a limitation of the phone itself and the software on the phone. If you install a web app, which is you go to a website and you like add to home button. I don't know if you guys have ever done that before, and then like an app icon shows up, but it's really just a website. You can't nearly have the same experience, just even in terms of like you going to a certain page within an app and then you open that icon again, it goes to the home page. Like they've made it just bad enough that you need a native app. They made it just bad enough, and they're brilliant at it. So right now, for everyone, I'd give you the advice of if you're gonna build something on the phone, build it native right now, because the platform that is going to empower the web is not out yet. It hasn't been released yet. My prediction is that that platform that's really gonna promote web apps is gonna be when Chrome operating system builds a phone. So when your phone is your browser and the operating system is the browser, right? That is gonna empower it. Because right now you're running an app inside of a browser that sits on top of an operating system. And it's so limited. So when the app sits directly on top of the operating system, which is on a browser OS, it's gonna change the game. It's gonna change the game wildly. I'll lose half my business.
So I have an app that's built on a platform which is music. Okay, so being a music app, what do you think is the right platform to build on? Because you have to build on.
Yeah. No. So if what my argument basically was, don't build web apps right now. It's not viable. People have a much better experience with native applications. So build like an Objective-C app or build a native Android app.
I'm referring back to what you were talking about earlier. Part of your advice to not build a platform
Upon a platform, right? So music is an industry. It's not a platform.
Okay. But it's a platform on mobile. Like you have to you either have to build it via iTunes or Spotify or YouTube somehow.
Yeah. So if you're gonna sit on top of iTunes, Spotify, or any of those, you'll probably like you won't run like, $100 million company. It won't happen. You need to build one of those platforms, i.e., like, will you compete directly with Spotify? Will you compete directly with SoundCloud? If you're building something that like lets you create lists from all your favorite SoundCloud songs, like, it's not going to work out. Yeah.
What is your sort of take on entering into an industry that the industry itself has big players, but you're taking a different spin? How do you everyone says talk to everyone immediately and advertise all the time, but
Yeah.
we don't have a product bill yet. So how do you navigate sort of the timing of that?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So one, I never find it fun when people come to us and talk in the future. It's like, I'm gonna have this, I'm gonna have that. It's like so much better just to have something. So it parlays into the conversation of an MVP. It's like, just get something out there so you can actually talk about, oh, I have this, right? It might not be like feature rich, it might not be the final version, but the goal is like, you should always be talking about your product. Again, we always see this. A lot of founders come to us and they make us sign an NDA. Oh, that's like one of the 10 telltale signs that someone's in like kind of an inexperienced or novice entrepreneur. They come and they're like, oh, we're not going to tell you our idea until you sign an NDA. Anyone that's willing to sign that NDA and then give you advice is probably not worth taking advice from, which goes back to the advice section. But just get over the NDAs. They're not even going to hold. Like, if no one has time. It takes 2 years to really test out an idea. Do you really think the person that you're talking to, and if they do have 2 years, then like, why are you talking to them? But like, they don't have time. They're all running companies, and everything is about execution. It's not the idea itself. How many people had an idea for a photo app? Like, come on. It's how they executed it that was key. So I mean, if there are a lot of big players in the market, one that shows that the market is disruptible, typically, especially if those big players are traditional companies. So that's already a good sign. Build something quick and then go up to them and talk to them about it and try and sign people up, find out what they want, get more info. The whole thing is about getting more info and then pivoting. Because again, everyone has an idea for what their product is, but it's only after they build, launch, and fail part of it that they actually find out what they're really trying to build. Cool? Anyone else?
Hey, yeah, I'm thinking about doing a startup, and I was wondering, since you're one of the premier co-working spaces in the city, could you talk a little bit about, should I try and go to a co-working space? Should I go from home on my own? Thought maybe like you could give some advice about that.
So Matthew is a founder of a successful company, and he's just having fun back there. And he used to work in my co-working space, and he sold his company to Vimeo, and now he has moved out and moved into the IAC building. And Matt, we miss you.
I think it's a real question, though.
So the question is, should you go to a co-working space or not?
Yeah. What should I do? Should I work from home in my pajamas?
Yeah. So I honestly think that there's different personality types. Some people thrive in an environment where they can be surrounded by people, inspired by people. Some people get completely distracted by being in like a cafe, for example. If you can't get work done in a cafe, it's a telltale sign that you should not probably start your company in a co-working space. So I think you should. I don't think a co-working space is for everyone. There's different designs to co-working spaces. So WeWork, for example, has rooms. So you can just rent out a room, and then it is kind of a controlled environment where if you do get distracted by other people, then you'll be fine. And then there's spaces like mine, which is a completely open floor plan, and there's a lot of activity. In those spaces, it's really, really easy to get distracted, so much so that I go back to the office after hours to get a lot of my work done, because during the day I'm just running around from one desk to the other desk. So it really depends on you, how you work efficiently if you want to work in a co-working space, and then pick the right co-working space that can facilitate that. But I think there is value. I think a lot of people there, everyone's gone through probably the problem that you're going through. It's whatever you're struggling with, chances are someone else has struggled with it and then solved it in some capacity. And so when you're in a co-working space, you can kind of just tap into the knowledge of the people around you, which is really cool.